Hey, Brass Facts here. Today we're going to be looking at the Holosun AEMS, or we're just going to call it the AEMS. The Holosun AEMS. This is a mailbox square optic from Holosun, and with the craze of box-shaped optics here, this actually looks to be a contender for one of the better ones. Well, Holosun has a track record of designing optics to mimic other optics already on the market. This, for once, actually is something that is mostly unique and that fills a niche that actually is quite barren. We'll get to that in a bit. Looking at the features of this Holosun, it's pretty standard. You get buttons to adjust the brightness. You get a turny thing to put where the dot is so you can zero the thing. That's basically about it. Hold the plus button to turn off or on the never bright enough auto adjust mode. I recommend just turning it off, it's not very good. And hold the minus button to switch between reticle types. The AEMS comes with her own proprietary mount. This is not an aim point pattern or anything, though there are some manufacturers already coming out with custom mounts for this optic. Battery is removed right here. And this is actually done better than the other Holosun optics with larger torque-style screws versus the much smaller and very strippable 507 or 403 style of battery housing. So you hear that hop, you're actually allowed to like this one. Another unique feature that sets the Holosun AEMS apart is the inclusions of these caps for the optic. These are built in, though you can remove them by simply unscrewing the mount that holds them in place. The mount, while still a tooled design, actually, if you listen, has a ratcheting system, and you very much get to a point where you can no longer turn it without really cranking on it. This is similar to something like an Aimpoint Pro, where you have a built-in torque limiter, so you can get very close to the correct torque setting, thus a degree of return to zero. I've taken this off and then put it back on, and I was close enough to continue hit targets. I can't say for sure if it's an exact return to zero because the TP9 itself doesn't necessarily hold zero the best due to the design of the firearm. Finally, the big thing is the night vision compatibility. This guy has night vision features and night vision brightness settings that are, wait for it, actually usable under night vision. That is not a given with budget optics, or in this case, a Holosun. A lot of Holosuns simply just do not get dark enough, even though they're advertised as having night vision settings. That is not an issue here. You can get this entire box-shaped package for about $400 on Amazon right now, though I've seen these regularly go for about $350, which I think is going to become the new market base for how much these cost. All right, what did I observe while owning this thing for about 4 months or so? First off, the caps are neat. You might ask, why would I need a cap on a red dot sight? Well, number one, they're obviously just a sacrificial surface, right? You drop your optic. This is going to give before the optic does. Duh, it's in the way. But also in a cold environment, if you breathe on your optic, you'll generally fog it up. This acts as a sacrificial thing for that. You fog up your optic, pop it down, it cools off, the fog goes away. You can plop it back up without missing a beat. So that is quite useful, and I like that feature. That being said, the execution leaves a little bit to be desired. While these are far more clear and less obtrusive, right? With something like an Aimpoint Pro, you'll notice the cap is on because it's of a weaker or more plasticky, softer material compared to the actual lens. That isn't the case here. I think these are polycarbonate or glass. However, there is noticeable scattering going on if you run this optic on a brighter setting than needed, which is something I typically do, right? For home defense, I want the optic very bright, so when I turn on my flashlight, it doesn't get washed out. For outdoor usage, like concealed carry, I'll always run it extra bright. Thus, I'm set up for the brightest condition, so I always can see a dot. I'd rather err on the side of seeing a dot, albeit being too bright, versus not seeing the dot at all if it was too dark, right? So if you run your red dots in this philosophy, running it a little bit bright, you will see noticeable amounts of diffraction. The lens covers themselves actually cause a phantom dot to appear at like a half MOA size, and it looks like a red dot. It looks like your optic is just simply too dim, but it's actually a second dot. If you flip down the rear cover, this dot goes away. but it is an obnoxious thing. And if I were to use this long term and like keep it, I would probably remove the rear cover, which is responsible for this phantom dot. Yes, that phantom dot does show up under night vision. You also get a crosshair styled diffraction pattern that is the optic, not the covers, and that only occurs when the optic is too bright relative to the environment. But it is annoying that it's there, though it's quite far out from the sight picture, right? It's kind of off to the housing. The pictures make it make more sense. There is some distortion to this optic that isn't because of the lens covers. It's intrinsic to the optic itself, and that makes sense because the forward lens is tilted back ever so slightly. So yes, there is distortion if you pivot the gun on an axis, but it's not that bad, and most optics have some degree of distortion. I would rate this as far less than an RMR or an MRO, but more than, say, an aim point or something. Doing a basic preliminary parallax test, it's about the same as all red dots. I decided I didn't really need to go any further when I was able to hit a 3-inch swinger at like 60 yards while maxing out the parallax on the optic. So that's as far as I felt like I needed to go. This solar mode is fucking useless. It's entirely used for the auto adjust brightness thing, right? So if you hold plus, you'll enter the auto adjust mode. I believe it ships in the auto adjust mode, and it uses the solar panel to gauge what brightness you need to be at. I thought the optic was broken. It's so bad, so just turn it off, forget it exists. While I'm generally mistrustful of Holosun's battery claims, and a lot of their optics have way less battery on a usable setting compared to what is advertised, which is typically 50,000 hours, it largely doesn't matter with some of these newer ones because they have auto off. So if you leave the optic lying around, it will shut off. This is the direction the industry is going, and is honestly just strictly better than having a super long battery life, right? Because this gives you functionally very long battery life. Eotech needs to get on that train already. That's really the only thing they need to be a front runner again. But like I said, Holosun has an auto off and it works very well. I've never had to wait for the auto off on to turn back on when I pick up the optic. Finally, what you've been all waiting for, what's the night vision performance like on this guy? Like I said, Holosun has a plethora of red dot sights, but debatably, most of them, if not all of them, aren't really for serious night vision use. Some of them can work in a pinch, but most of them end up just being way too bright for real dark environments. And no, dark environments do not include your backyard if you live within 30 miles of a city. For the ones that do have good night vision settings, all of them, and yes, I mean all of them, including the 510, just don't have very good light transmission and are more comparable to something like an Aimpoint Pro, which is usable, but it's like looking through a sheet of tinted glass versus something like a Eotech, which is essentially just a sheet of, like, you're looking through nothing under night vision. I don't know how Holosun did it. Maybe they're getting military secrets from their Chinese counterparts from stolen Aimpoint tech. I don't know, but this thing cracked the code. This has really close light transmission to something like an Eotech or an Aimpoint T2. That is not a small feat. There are plenty of optics from high-end manufacturers like Trijicon MROs, RMRs, Aimpoint Pros, whatever, that have very good night vision settings, but they don't have the light transmission to back it up, and when you use it in truly dark environments, you're struggling. I don't know how, but the AEMS got it. This is comparable to an Eotech. Link up here, where am I pointing? Link up here, where I do a in-depth comparison, but you've seen the footage in the background. The gist of it is, this is about 10%, just a rough, gutsy feeling number, 10% close to a Eotech in terms of light transmission. That's pretty damn good. It also has a wide box, which, unlike something like a T2, allows you to kind of see around your target just that little bit easier. Yes, I know the T2 kind of has a floating effect, but wide boxes are nice for night vision. Okay, on to the opinion. It's worth noting that so far, as we look through this is actually a perfectly functional daytime red dot sight. That being said, there really isn't too much here that sets it apart from other red dots, both in the budget, medium, and pricey categories, that make it an exceptional daytime optic, unless you're a really fan of all the features presented here, like how it looks, and you really like wide field of view red dot sights. However, where I get excited is the night vision performance, and that's mostly what I'm going to talk about, and I believe most people that seek this optic out specifically are here for that passive aiming night vision performance. Look, it's a red dot ultimately. Aaron Cowan has already done the best torture test on the internet on this guy. Thing's durable. It's a Holosun, so you already know you need to expect some Holosun quality assurance issues, which in fairness, they're getting better and better by the year. But ultimately, red dots are a dime a dozen, and watching this video, you've already probably decided if this meets your requirement, or doesn't. It comes very close to Eotech performance under night vision, and it's got auto on and auto off, which means you have a good battery life. And it looks kind of cool. The mailbox design is growing on me. Looking at this optic objectively though, it sort of snuck up on me and I didn't even realize it until about halfway through the review. This thing kind of slaps. A lot of people are relegating red dots to essentially be either a night vision gun optic, so a gun dedicated for night vision, or a PCC option. And most PCCs or PDWs don't have room for a laser aiming device. So night vision passive performance, if you have night vision, is super important. But in terms of the sphere of optics that are actually good for passive aiming under night vision, it's really just the Aimpoint T2 or the Eotech. In my humble opinion, getting one of those two, or maybe the Huey, you're not really doing serious passive aiming shooting because stuff like this doesn't quite cut it if you're shooting in the dark. But then this bitch comes along and at a far lower price point has the benefits of the Eotechs without having the Eotechs crippling Achilles' heel. Yes, the battery life. Sure, this thing has more parallax versus the near zero parallax you'll be experiencing with a modern Eotech, and the circle dot is done slightly worse in my opinion, right? This has a half MOA center dot, this has like a 3 MOA center dot. The flip side of that statement is that a lot of times, especially at that extended range under passive aiming, let's say about 60 yards, which would likely actually be the desired range to engage passively, sometimes under low light conditions, the Eotech circle dot is actually too big, right? And a lot of the target is obscured. And since passive aiming is a desperate game of trying to get as much information through your little tube as possible, that area that's covered by essentially a glowing ring might actually get in the way. And the ability to switch to a simple dot that you can actually turn down is actually very advantageous. And I found myself in low light scenarios gravitating more towards the Holosun single dot over the Eotech's circle dot, right? The Holosun can do both, the Eotech can only do one. What was I talking about again? Oh, right. Yeah, so the Holosun absolutely dominates in this regard because, well, you can simply just leave it on. Don't get me wrong, I like the Eotech and I'll probably be buying one to use, right? This one isn't mine. But the Eotech is a very niche optic for civilians in my eyes, and it has some serious limitations where you literally have to design SOPs around using your optical device, while with the Aimpoint AEMS, for a civilian, you just leave it on and forget about it. Another way to put it, right, when I'm talking about passive night vision usage, man, I really love my Eotech, but that damn battery life. Yeah, that's why I sold it. How often have you heard that? Well, this guy right here might be the answer. It's an Eotech-esque performer or an Aimpoint T2-like performer with excellent battery life without a ridiculous price tag. That's pretty good. Okay, that's been some brass facts for you. I hope you enjoyed this video. This one was a little bit more ad-lib compared to normal. I tried to cut down on my script so I could speak more freely. I don't know if I like this style. You guys can let me know in the comments. If this was interesting for you, consider supporting the channel. I run this channel on a very large deficit. A buck or two from my viewers helps a lot more than you probably think and ensures the channel can last long term, especially with YouTube cracking down again recently. You also get live recordings of me and Hop getting absolutely drunk and potentially talking about topics and then uploading them as podcasts. But if not, no worries. commenting, all that stuff. I love reading the comments before work, so that also works too. Anyways, it's been fun, guys. We'll see you guys around. Thanks so much.